over the weekend, we had the first big night of sports cards. I mean, if I'm going to be honest, or at least the first big night of 2025. That's right. That's what I meant. There was the 2025 Winter Golden 100 auction that there were tons of monster cards that were sold. And I'm just going to go through some of the auctions here. And we're going to talk about, I don't know, a couple of the cards, a couple different things I saw. The first thing that I was actually very surprised by. So there were a lot of auctions that were over 100K. That was one thing that I was sort of surprised by. The one thing that I was very surprised by was the one of one Saquon Barkley National Treasures Shield autograph sold only for $26,000. I know some 10 years ago, people would look at that and say, $26,000. Oh my God, that's crazy. But like, in comparing to these auctions, just to look at some of the other cards that sold, there was a Alex Ovechkin. It looks like this is like the Cup rookie patch auto. This was numbered to 15. That sold around 21. There was a John Morant that sold for around 17. That was a Prism rookie. I think it was a one of one. There was a 2015 Immaculate Kobe Shaq autograph that sold for 29, which was higher than the Barkley. And basically from there it just goes up. There was a PSA 7 star Jordan rookie. It looks like it's in a new holder too. That probably makes a big difference. There was a PSA 7 Bill Russell 1957 that sold for $36,000. So as much as I think that position players are undervalued in the hobby, I think the terminology using undervalued really just comes down to what the market is saying. And the market right now is saying that it doesn't matter if you just had one of the statistically one of the best seasons a running back has ever had. You move from New York to Philadelphia, you win the Super Bowl. You are maybe not impactful in the Super Bowl necessarily because it's like literally that's the only thing that the Chiefs tried to do was stop Saquon Barkley, putting a bunch of extra people in the box and then leaving wide receivers and D-backs to be going on one-on-ones the whole entire game essentially. So, again, it's the market saying that position players really are just not, they don't hold as much value as other, because the one of one Patrick Mahomes, which I know is sort of a big leap of an example, but that one sold for multiple millions of dollars. The one of one Shield autograph from National Treasure. So that was the one thing that I was most surprised by as I was looking through these cards. We'll go back up to the top here. There was the first $1 million sale of 2025 happened, which pretty crazy. If I'm going to be honest, this is a pretty crazy sale for in retrospect. Like there was one of the number to 23 LeBron James exquisite RPAs sold for $1.2 million, which I mean, that's what some of the number to 99 exquisites were selling for a couple of years ago. Some of them even selling in the $2 million range. Like if you were to tell me that 3 years ago, if you were to tell me in 2020, 2021 that there would be a LeBron exquisite number to 23 being sold, I would have easily estimated in the $5 to $6 million range. For it to go for 1.2, I think is pretty telling. But then also the one of one Wembanyama, which this was kind of the reason why I was looking into this topic, because I knew that card was going to be selling. And I was going to touch on and then maybe get into other topics, but then I looked at the whole slate of the rest of the auctions, and that card sold for $86,000, which I think is now the most expensive Wembanyama card. So it seems like the injury really didn't affect the price of that card. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some rescinded bids, but it's still sold for almost $1 million. Now that's probably, I don't know. I would argue that's probably one of his best cards. Like it's in the top 5 for sure, or top 10, I would say top 10. And for Prism, obviously there's only going to be the 3 one of ones for Wembanyama, and there's no autograph for Wembanyama either out of Prism, obviously, because he was a Topps athlete. But yeah, this card sells for $86,000. I don't know. I'm not super surprised by that. I think if you're comparing the two cards, if you have $86,000 or sorry, not $86,000. I don't know if I've been saying $86,000. $860,000 is the amount that card sold for. I hope I hadn't been saying $86,000 the whole time I've been talking about this card. But if you have $860,000, you just pony up and buy the LeBron. Like the LeBron is such a better card, and to I don't like know what that says about the industry as a whole, but like it's not frustrating or annoying really. It's just like what are we even like what are these people thinking that are buying these cards that you're spending six almost seven figures on a card, and the difference between one of the number to 23 LeBron rookie patch autographs out of one of the best sets of all time sells for only $400,000 less. Now, $400,000, that's obviously significant. It's one third of the price of or half of the price of the Wembanyama, if you're looking at it that way. But it's like, how are those only how are those so close? How are those in that same bracket of sports cards? How, like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And it's one of the things that in the industry where I just sit there and I scratch my head every single time, like, why people like buy every single time they buy the newest player. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And I understand Wembanyama. Sorry, I know I've been saying that wrong, but Wembanyama is one of the best prospects in basketball in since Zion before he started playing. He's electric. He is one of the best prospects. But like, at what point do people like? How is that one of one? Like this, like I don't think like here's one of the a thing that and I'm kind of even a loss for words here if I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know how to explain that to somebody. And within sports cards, it's just something that like I can't I couldn't tell someone with a straight face why a one of a rookie of one of the most mass produced products. It will be 2023 Prism basketball will be one of the biggest mass produced products of all time when I think when it's all said and done. Sure, it's a one of one, but there's three one of ones. There's multiple one of ones in that product. So it's like, how if there were one of one non-auto in that product, I think that this prices make sense. Now, I always talk about opportunity costs and how often is this card going to be sold. So sure, maybe that could have something to do with the price of it, but it doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. And sure, maybe it's somebody who's obviously someone who's rich, and it's not somebody who is worried about selling this card anytime soon, because I don't think that this card ever sells for that much ever in the future. I think there's Wembanyama could go on to win multiple championships. I think he could go on to win multiple MVPs. And I don't think that card will ever crack the $800,000 again. So maybe it's opportunity cost. Maybe there are reasons why someone bought this card. But it's like to buy that card over the LeBron, to have the money to spend on that card and then not to spend it on the LeBron card just doesn't make any sense to me. It just is insane. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I'm kind of done talking about that card specifically. I don't know. Maybe there will be other stuff that pops up. We had a Kobe from Skybox, I believe this is the same product that recently had that's the Allen Iverson that recently sold for 700,000. The one of 8 for Kobe sold for $579,000. That's I think we may see a resurgence in some of these 90s cards from the exclusive parallel, some of the lower number parallels. I could definitely see a bit of a resurgence there. Let's see. We also had a PSA 7 Mickey Mantle that sold for $457,000. And then the 1 of 10 Luka Doncic, which is a PSA 10 from 2018 Prism, that sold for $341,000. So again, I understand the purchase of the Luka more than I understand the purchase of the Wembanyama, because at least Luka is playing for the Lakers and there's probably a decent shot that he signs with the Lakers. So it's like getting the gold parallel now that he's on the Lakers, I guess makes a little bit of sense. But this was also one of the pieces that I was talking about. Like, I don't really understand where some of this money is coming from. And the cards themselves, I guess I understand why people are still spending high money on them. It's pretty much just, I think it's just rich people at this point. Like, I don't think realistically it's anybody that's in the industry now that's trying to buy and sell, that's trying to flip. These types of cards, I just don't think are those people are not buying these cards. I think that this is probably just rich people that have the money that are looking to spending the money on cards. When whether those are people that are in the industry or whether those are people that are rich and trying to get into the industry, I don't really know one way or the other. But I just think that the money that's being spent is still pretty crazy. And I mean, like, the kind of the last piece that I'll talk about this auction, I guess maybe if there's other stories, I'll talk about them later this week. Is just that, like, it's surprising that, like, how many of these cards are like so iconic and so crazy, and the promotion of them really didn't feel like it was very much. Like, sure, I know Golden does a pretty good job with their marketing, and I think they do a pretty good job marketing their cards, but it's like when you have 100 cards that are all like holy grails in the hobby, I would say. I mean, a 1 of 10 Luca PSA 10 gold parallel from 2018 Prism. That's a holy grail type card. Like, that's until the 1 of 1 Luca is found. That is probably one of the most rare. This will probably want to be one of the most rare, most coveted Lucas that there could be. A PSA 10 for a card that's numbered to 10. So, again, maybe if you'd buy the Luca over the mantle, but there's an argument to be had there as well. But I think overall, I wonder who is buying one card over the other, and I just don't. I don't see the upside in any of these cards, but I think ultimately within the industry, within sports cards, sometimes people just want to buy things and they don't really care about what the upside is, I guess. For today's episode, I've got I don't know, a couple of topics here I'll talk about, and I'll see if any of them end up being the majority of the episode. I do have one topic that is the last one I'm going to cover that I think will probably be the majority of the episode if I have to guess. So first, out of Topps Chrome Football, the 1 of 1 Superfractor Tom Brady has been pulled. Superfractor autograph Tom Brady, excuse me. On card autograph. I mean, the card uses a pretty old looking image. I mean, obviously, being a Patriots fan, I've seen Brady throughout the years, so I know what he looks like. And the image they use looks pretty old. Like, I mean, even the jersey, like, sure, obviously we know that they photoshopped the jersey, but like, if you look at the specific jersey and just Brady's face and how he looks, it's from early on in his career. So obviously it's not a rookie card, but I don't know. I, I- I'm I spoke about Topps Chrome Football last week, and kind of throughout whenever there's news about it, I've been kind of covering it. It's good and bad. I think that's one way I would put it. The other one thing that is coming out this week for Topps, they put out their like weekly schedule, is 2023-24 Topps Midnight Basketball. They're still using the 2023 class. I mean, again, there are no regulators. There are no way to regulate these things. The only way to do it is through people not buying the product. But at the same time, like, I don't think Topps has a good feel for what the market really wants, because of the way that I know, or at least the way that I've heard contracts work with distributors, whatever, is they have to buy a bunch of other product to get the good product. So this could be one that's just on the list of product that they have to get. So that places have to buy in order for them to uh get other good products. So, I don't think Topps has a good sense of how, if this is going to be popular or not. It's going to have Wembenyama in it, obviously. But like, at some point, they need to just be like, at some point, just start putting non-rookie autos in. Like, I just don't understand. And it's frustrating. And maybe I'm getting a little worked up because the other topic is also that I'm going to talk about is very frustrating. It's just like, what are we, like, why why are the companies allowed to just come out with, like, it needs to be the players association that need to make I think the players association needs to be more involved in Topps. They're really the only ones that have any control, I think, in my opinion, on They're the only ones that have any control about what the companies are doing. So I don't know. I'm hoping in the next few years, as Tops and Fanatics are taking over, that the Players Association can get more involved in these things, and maybe somebody who is in the community can be on the Players Association side and say, hey, you can't, we're not going to allow you to come out with 2023 product in 2025. I mean, it's a pretty novel concept, and it's pretty, obviously it's a hot take, because it's like, well, they just keep coming out with 2023 product. It's so ridiculous. It's almost insulting, if I'm actually going to be honest. It's almost it's really is just like I can't explain. Again, it's a thing where it's like I can't explain why 2023 product is coming out in 2025. It's very frustrating, if I'm going to be completely honest. Um, the other thing, just to kind of wrap up yesterday's topics about some of the sales that happened this past weekend, there were also there were two other $1 million sales. I know I talked on the podcast. We had the first $1 million sale. There was actually three $1 million sales this weekend that I believe happened through Heritage, and actually two through Heritage and then one through Golden. So far, we have $3 million sales. Chris Hoge from House of Jordans put out, a good, not really a graph, but he put out the statistics, which is good, because I need to keep this. I need to know this for the future. 2024, there was only six. Well, only, but whatever. You'll see why I'm saying only. 2026, or excuse me, 2024, there were $6 million sales. 2023, there were $9 million sales. 2022, there were $41 million sales. 2021, there were 41 also. And then 2020, there was 9. So that's why when I'm saying there's only 6, it's because in 2022 and 2021 and 2022, there were 82 total sales over $1 million, which I think is pretty wild. I don't know. I think the 3 to 9 is probably where we end up sitting from now on, like just in the future. I mean, these were big sales at the beginning of the year, so maybe people had a little bit of extra cash to throw around. So that's why these cards all sold in one weekend for $3 million, and we're only 2 months into the year. We're already halfway to the total amount that were sold in 2024, and so now we're going to get to a topic that I feel very. It's annoying in the same sense of I'm annoyed with Tops. So Run Good Life, again, another account that I do focus on sometimes, because I think they put out some thought-provoking takes here. They're talking about how Whatnot has chosen to remove all VOD replays of sellers' past shows. If you miss your break as it happens live, or want to watch it back and screenshot your hits or something, you can't without the seller putting the VOD on a different platform. Now, this is, I think, this is frustrating on a couple different levels. And I know that I've been frustrated in this episode, but this is frustrating on a couple different levels. One, so we're just going to, breaking has been an industry, a part of the hobby that is super important, but it's also been one that we have seen over the past few years. I feel like the most fraud in a new industry we have seen has come from breaking, other than, other than shill bidding, I think is one of the biggest things. So now we're just trusting that these breakers are going to do the correct thing, and that they know what they're doing, and that they're going to ship you the cards that you're getting correct. All this is going to do is that breakers are just not going to ship cards. Like, that's what this is doing. And, I don't know if this has a policy that has to do with backyard breaks and they're trying to fix that, but it's like, somebody that isn't again, I feel like we have executives working in the industry that they don't know anything about cards. They don't know anything about it. They just don't know about the industry. This is I'm hoping that they reverse this soon. And I'm hoping that because it's just like, and even Fanatics Live is dunking on them. Fanatics Live was even tweeting that like all replays will be available on your show, on your channel. It's like, I don't know what they're like. I don't know who is making the decisions over at Whatnot, but like, it's clearly not somebody who cares about the industry or cares about their reputation. Like, I just don't understand who could greenlight this idea that we're not going to put up the VOD of a break where it's like, and we're just going to trust that we're just going to trust that breakers have everybody's best interest in mind. And it's like, again, it's like, I don't know. There's no rules, there's no regulators, there's no anything in this industry. And it's so frustrating. Over the past few months and weeks, I've been getting more and more frustrated with just stupid things happening in the hobby that, again, or maybe it's even years, because this isn't new. This isn't new that a company is making a decision that is doesn't gonna, that's going to hurt a collector or going to hurt people in the industry. But it's like we're just trusting these breakers that they're going to ship the correct cards, and you're not going to be able to see the cards. And they're trying to get away. I'm sure maybe it has something to do with the backyard break situation where it's like the VOD was up and that's what led to. Also, they're just backyard breaks is just back too. That's another thing that I'm like frustrated with. It's like they're just back posting on Instagram. Like again, somebody was like, they're not going to post on Twitter, obviously, but they're just back on Instagram. Like they're just back posting. And, I've seen that they've just rebranded or some of their channels have just been rebranded a little bit. Now they're doing breaks again. So it's like, again, there's just no rules and no one really cares. And it's just like, I get frustrated when it's stuff like this happens because I enjoy talking about the industry, but it's like when this type of thing, it's like it's such an interesting spectrum of like seeing $1 million sales and being excited about those and seeing cool things that are happening in the industry. And then, but then it's just like, but then we're just allowing fraudulent behavior to occur in the industry also. It's like, I don't understand how the people at the and it's because of the money. Obviously, I feel like that's probably what it comes down to. If I'm going to be completely honest, because backyard breaks, they're one of the biggest breakers on Whatnot. They're one of the biggest breakers in this industry. And I mean, the industry is very quick to move on from things because it's such a fast paced industry and there's so much news that happens every single day that I feel like people are quick to move on from something. And move on from something in the sense that, like, hypothetically, if somebody's just not on social media, which I can't imagine there's too many people that are, but on one sense I can't imagine there is, but on the other hand, I'm like, well, there has to be. If some of this stuff is happening, there just has to be people that aren't seeing the stuff on social media, and that also just doesn't make much sense to me. Like, there must be people that don't have social media that are breaking with them and they don't know what happened and they just are like, oh, there's break and they have good price. Maybe they have good prices. I don't know exactly what is the appeal of their breaks in general. Like that they pull good cards. Like, I mean, they were breaking 24/7 and I don't know. I think I'm going to wrap things up here because it's deleting the VODs and not having the VODs unless they post them on a different platform, I think is an idiotic decision. And that is probably one of the nicer words that I could use realistically, because I think the language that I should be using is probably a little bit more vulgar, and I'm not going to do that on the podcast, but it's an idiotic decision. And I think both Tops is making an idiotic decision by coming out with 2023 basketball cards. And I think Whatnot that's an idiotic decision that they're deleting the VODs and that they're just allowing whatever to happen on their platform. It frustrates me, and I'm hoping that we see some changes in the future. But I mean, I don't know. I've been saying for years that I thought we would see some changes, and nothing really has changed in terms of that type of stuff. So I don't know. We'll see, I guess, what happens going forward. But at least for now, maybe it's just something that unfortunately customers have to expect and people within the industry have to expect. So a couple weeks ago, probably like 2 weeks ago, I talked about the Four Nations and the changing of the All-Star game, the All-Star weekend to the tournament, that I thought was a phenomenal idea. I went to the game, not the championship game, the game before for USA versus Sweden. It was definitely a cool atmosphere. I mean, the game itself was pretty boring and horrible because the USA scored in the first 30 seconds of the game and then didn't score for the rest of the game. And they basically sat half their players. And it turns out that half their players were hurt in the first place, which I think is pretty wild. Obviously, I think Olympic competition and the national teams versus national teams, I think brings out a different level within hockey, maybe more than it does within other sports, because like if you're talking basketball, sure, there's like that documentary that's on Netflix that goes over the Olympics, but it's like the USA has won whatever. They said it was like 6 out of the last 8 Olympic golds in basketball. So it's like, it's actually kind of surprising that we're able to still that the narrative around that feels like it's more competitive. Like the World Baseball Classic, I think that was another one that like we saw the excitement around USA versus Japan. Like, so I'm surprised that other sports haven't tried to figure it out. I mean, baseball and I think baseball and hockey probably have the best national, like, they probably have the most diverse amount of people from different countries. Like basketball, sure, but like the talent in the USA is so overwhelmingly better for basketball than it is for other sports. Like USA is hardly even number one and well, clearly not number one because they lost to Canada in that championship game. But their alt put out, I think it was yesterday, the day before, they put out the top 10 publicly sold cards during the last like 7 days, which was kind of when the nation's tournament really kind of leveled up in terms of what people were excited for. The numbers are not very high. I'm going to be honest here. And I guess it's not super surprising considering where hockey is in the landscape of all of sports cards. The number one player was the captain, Austin Matthews, who, I mean, again, these numbers are not very high. Had $55,000 worth of sales. And then from there, it kind of progressively goes down pretty quickly. You had Jack Hughes, who was like a younger rookie, not a rookie, but like a younger player. I believe he plays for New Jersey, maybe. And his was at 17,000. And then from there, it's really, like I said, from 55 to 17. But I think the other interesting thing there within the tournament was that the number one team in the number one team in the NHL didn't have any players play the in and the and we can see that in the past two games. Like the Washington, I was about to call them the Nationals, no, the Washington Capitals. They like didn't have like, oh, I mean, Ovi probably wasn't going to play because he would obviously didn't qualify in any of the nations, which is why I think it would be interesting for them to figure out how to expand this tournament and maybe take some of the smaller nations and combine them into one, or I don't know. I mean, or just be like it's Team Europe or it's Team North America or it's Team any of the countries that they could figure out how to, or I don't know. I think USA and Canada you probably could do separate, and then Europe I think you probably could do separate. I don't think you, because like Europe and North America, those are obviously two continents, and the countries within those, I think within USA and Canada, are obviously countries within the continent. And I think it really, I mean, going into the next Olympics, I think is going to be very interesting also because now they're letting NHL players play in the Olympics, and they're essentially. I think the All Star break is going to be around the Olympic break next year, so there's not going to be an All Star game again. And I don't know if this going forward is going to be the way that they do the All Star game for the NHL. But from a card perspective, I think the NHL and hockey cards have a very interesting, they have an interesting trajectory potentially with the national teams, like with the excitement around the Olympics. And I think this tournament really showed how exciting Olympic hockey can be with NHL players. And I think it really, for them to do this ahead of the world, or excuse me, ahead of the Olympics, I think is a pretty big deal. So I don't know, maybe hockey, if you're looking to buy some players and hold for the Olympics, that could be a potential play there. I don't necessarily have like plays or calls here, but on the podcast, but I think that could be a potential if you're picking the right players for Team USA. I mean, I think the Kachucks, like they have the potential to be like national superstars, I think, within the league based on like, obviously I think Matthew Tkachuk got hurt and might be out for the rest of the season, which is a little bit unfortunate. Which a lot of players kind of got hurt. I mean, a lot of USA players got a little hurt, like McAvoy, another Bruins player or a Bruins player got hurt and might be out for the season as well. So I don't know. That might be an interesting thing to look into if you're kind of looking for a sport to maybe prospect a little bit and you're prospecting players who are going to be on USA national team or any of the other national teams potentially as well. And then the other topic that I want to talk about there's only gonna be the two topics. I mean, I went on my little rant yesterday and there are some updates that I saw. It was like from Whatnot, it said that you can watch back the stream, the part that you purchased your break. Now I'm hoping that it's the whole break and we're not going to be relying on like AI to like show you when your specific cards. That actually probably doesn't make much sense. It probably has to be the whole break of the boxes that you bought into, but still it's only available for customers of that specific break, and it's only available for 60 days. So updates that change my opinion a little bit, because your people will be able to see the replays if you purchased, but still I think the concept and the change I think is still it's still going to be a very net negative thing for the industry. But so the other post, so Sports Card Investor put out, this was kind of I don't know why they put this out. It was sort of random. It's based on some gem rate data. So it was the top 5 PSA Jordan cards of all time, the graded Jordan cards of all time. And the 86 Fleer is actually only number 4 on this list. So in reverse order, it goes number 5, 88 Fleer, number 4, 86 Fleer, number 3, 91 Upper Deck, 92, 89 Hoops, and then number 1 is the 1990 Fleer basketball, which has almost double number 2, and it has actually more than double for the 1986 Fleer. So I think in the 90s and 90s and late 80s and early 90s cards, I think are, for Jordan at least, are going to be very popular. I think that was like right before we saw like a crazy jump in the hobby, or it was like that's when it kind of got going, were were these specific years. And I think I was sort of surprised that the 86 Fleer was not like number 1, but at the same time, I guess that does make sense because, like I said, the 1990, 89, 91, like those years were right when cards were kind of getting back into like a peak year. I mean, a peak era. And obviously, I think having Jordan, like that's like if hypothetically 86 Fleer was like, I don't know, 90. No, that would be like if it was like 2018 baseball with like Otani. And then like the next few years, you saw more and more Otani cards continuously coming out, and the print runs of those cards continuously going up as well. I do also think it's a good thing that it's a diverse list of different cards. I think it gives people the ability to buy different Jordan cards because Jordan, not anymore, but he was a player that was in almost every single set in the 90s, like every single insert set, very similar to Shohei Otani. But I think even looking back at those years compared to eras now, like I think those years are still going to be a lot lower than what they would be nowadays. Because I think nowadays grading has become almost not a necessity necessarily, but it almost has become part of like the experience of getting cards. Like either whether it's opening a box or doing whatever and then getting those cards graded, it's become easier than ever, it's become more accessible than ever. And cards in the 90s, the grading of them may not have been as easy as we thought. And I think some of those other years potentially could just be that like if you have talked to anybody, and have you told anybody that you're into sports cards, they're going to tell you that they have some cards and they are like, this is the list of cards that they have basically. Like if they tell you they have some Jordan cards, like there is probably a decent shot that they have one of those cards on that list. So there's a shot that like those are some of the cards that were getting graded. Actually, was this? No, it was just top 5 graded, not PSA 10s, because that would be the statistics on those. Like the Fleer Jordan, I know only has like less than 400. Like I know it was 320 a couple years ago. It's probably gone up a little bit over the past few years. But like those are the cards that people have. So it's like those are the ones they're going to be getting graded. Where nowadays I feel like people aren't even going to get to a point where in 20 years they're going to say we have these cards. They're probably going to get to a point with like modern cards that like they're just going to be, yeah, I have these cards, but they're already going to be graded, to be honest. So I saw a very good video on social media from Neo Cards and Comics on Instagram, and then Quorum Cards posted on TikTok of Michael Rubin talking to a group of people at a hobby shop. And it was like a 1 minute clip. I suggest going to check it out. And here are some of the takeaways from that clip. So the first one that I thought was interesting, he broke it down pretty. I mean, I was kind of I'm surprised that he broke it down this much in terms of like giving people information like this, if I'm going to be completely honest. He said that about 20% of product goes to Target and Walmart, which that I think the 20% of product would be retail product, obviously, because there's no hobby boxes hobby don't go to retail most of the time. And blasters sometimes go to hobby shops, but like for the most part, that's what that is. So it's like the 20% is like it's a specific type of product that is going to retail stores. So there was that. Then he said 40% is going to hobby shops, and then the other 40% is going to breakers. And someone asked a question about like how are you going to make these cards more affordable, and Michael Rubin said that that's one of their priorities, and I guess I don't really see how it is. I mean, I think if Tops were to regulate their prices a little bit better, like, hmm, it's tough because breaking, you don't really need a license. If you're going to own a hobby shop, I believe you're going to need you're going to need licenses and stuff for the building and for all of the, business related things. But breaking, you don't need any license. And that's where I think that Tops, Fanatics, Panini, Upper Deck, they need to step in here, and they need to put more regulations in breaking. Like, because it's such a new industry that I feel like maybe we don't even know what the rules should be or what they are. Like, hobby shops have just I feel like they don't necessarily have a ton of rules necessarily, and I'm putting rules in quotations because I'm sure they do. But like what people charge for things, I feel like is such a big deal in the hobby. And I think on one hand, yeah, I understand that these are businesses and these are all every single step of things within the hobby is somebody running a business. Whether you are and whether you think you are or not, if you are doing anything within the hobby, you are sort of running your own business. If you're buying and selling singles, now if you're not really selling, then you're not really running a business necessarily. Like if you're just buying and not selling, then you're not obviously. But if you are buying and selling, that is the I think the base level. You are running a business, whether you think you are or you aren't. If you're paying taxes, you're running a business. Like that's just what it is. And that's another thing that's coming up is tax season. Now, I don't think I'm not the person to come to with these types of questions about taxes. You should be talking to a professional, and it's worth actually paying a CPA if you can find one. Nowadays, it can be a little, or now this time of year, it can probably be a little tough. It might be actually maybe even a little bit too late to talk to a CPA about this type of stuff. But going to H&R Block, going to any of these places, but if you find like somebody who can do business taxes, that's what I would suggest doing because they're going to help you out with everything. And they'll probably help you out for the next year to figure out how you can optimize your business a little bit better from a tax perspective. But if you are doing any of these things, you're running a business. So I think one of the things that Michael Rubin was saying that another point in the video Michael Rubin was talking about was he was talking about how breakers are good for the hobby because they get excitement. They get the excitement into the market, which I do agree with that because breakers are really the ones that are pulling all of the crazy cards. Like, I don't know. I'm I'm wondering like the the thing that I think is important here that I think is actually the numbers I would be interested in is what the percentage of like good, and I'm using a lot of air quotations, but good cards, like what the percentage of autographs and memorabilia, what are the percentages going there? Because I'd have to figure the Targets and Walmarts are getting 5%. Like the product that you can get at Target and Walmart, you're not really pulling many good cards out of realistically. Now, the hobby shops and I think even breakers, like I would be very interested what the percentage of cards that you are pulling. Now, I think obviously too, those two well actually no, it's probably about the same percentage if I had to guess, which is because most there is breaker products that Tops and Fanatics create, but for the most part, a lot of the cards that breakers are opening are just hobby boxes. So the percentage is probably very similar in terms of like an overall percentage, because like obviously a breaker, if they're, if they get 100 boxes, hope hypothetically, and they're breaking 100 boxes versus like if a hobby shop, and because I think it's not apples to oranges here. I think you got to look at percentage wise. Like if a hobby shop hypothetically, and these are numbers that I think are a lot higher, but I'm just using smaller numbers, so I think to get my point across, if one breaker is opening up 100 boxes, there might be a hobby shop um that's selling 20 to 30 boxes. So, like, sure, the number of hits or the number of good cards breakers are going to get is going to be much higher. But I would also be interested to know what percentage is, and I get these are maybe questions that I don't know. Maybe if I meet Michael Rubin one day, he would know. But I'm sure I would be interested to know how much of the sports card stuff. It seems like he's very knowledgeable about it, if I'm going to be completely honest. It's very surprising to see him out and doing things and answering questions and kind of giving a little bit of transparency, which is something that I do think is very important. I think I like that Michael Rubin is doing this, and especially in this industry where for years it felt like it wasn't necessarily deception that I think was going on in the hobby, but I think it was a lot of like the people who knew what was going on were the ones making the money, and the people who didn't really know were the ones that were getting not really ripped off, but they're the ones that the people who knew what they were doing were making money. Um, and the other thing that I was just about to bring up is I would be interested to know how many, like, what percentage of hobby shop distribution is also breaker distribution, because nowadays if you're a hobby shop, there's probably a decent shot that you have some bit of an online presence and that you're doing breaks. So like if you are specifically a breaker, um like what is the percentage of hobby shops versus like how many people are specifically just hobby shops, no breaking, and how many people are breaking with no hobby shops, or breaking just specifically. They don't own a hobby shop, because I'm sure there's people like that have hobby shops that also do breaking. So I'm sure there's probably a little bit of crossover there. And I think I don't know. I over the past few weeks, obviously, I've been getting more frustrated with some of the things that are going on in the hobby. I think I hope that Top sees some of the things that people are unhappy with, and that they are they are either able to rectify or they're able to fix these things going forward. Because I think ultimately, Tops, Panini, Upper Deck, I think maybe more Tops and Fanatics, is that business is so big, and the sports card business is so big within Fanatics, that I do look at like and again we're using maybe percentages, and I wonder like what percentage of each product every single person is working on within the company. Like does it like and I know for a fact that this is probably how the business is run, because it's how, in the corporate world most businesses are run. They just have different departments for different things. You got the design department, you got the distribution department, you've got the I don't know what the department would be called, like the creation department, like the actual or product department, maybe something that along those lines, the marketing department. So all of these departments, they should be working together, and they probably are working together a little bit. But like earlier this week I was upset about the 2023 basketball still coming out, and that really could just be as simple as something as like the product team doesn't know that maybe someone on the product team who is supposed to be the one putting out the schedule or putting out these things doesn't really understand like that these products are supposed to come out when the players are still rookies. Like maybe they look at someone like Panini and they say, well, they're coming out with basketball cards that are old or football cards that are old. So it's like, what difference does it make if we do? Especially they might even look at it and say it's an unlicensed product, so who's really going to care? And I think that is one mindset to have there for sure. But also it's like I think Fanatics has a long way to go in terms of gaining more trust within the hobby, because I think doing stuff like coming out with Wembenyama cards in 2025 is, for me, it is hurting my trust with the company because I look at it and I say, who even could have approved this? It could even be just that it was delayed potentially. Like, we don't know the scheduling and how all of these things work. Like, we're not privy to this information. And I think the transparency that Michael Rubin is offering is good. I just think that, like, when there are things like that, I just wish that there was more transparency of, like, why, why is there 2023 product coming out in 2025? Like, or even if, like, they could, I don't know, obviously they're not going to scrap it because of, a money perspective, but, like, I just think I just wonder a lot of things within this industry and how it's being run, and if it's actually sports card people that are running the companies, or if they're just corporate executives that are running the companies, because this is something that I've thought about for a while. The number of people, like the pool of people who are sports card enthusiasts and could be at the executive levels at some of these companies, the pool of people is not very high. And we've seen that with CEOs and people of different companies moving back and forth between companies. So it's like the pool is not very big, and when the pool is not very very big, that means you have to go outside the pool to get people who are executive level people. But the sports card industry is very nuanced, and it needs more attention to detail, and attention to detail that people probably don't even really expect. So, in the future, I hope that maybe other people other than Michael Rubin can come out and maybe give some of these answers, because sure, Michael Rubin has all the answers, but I think that there are issues that are going on that are caused by people that aren't Michael Rubin making decisions, or people who don't know what's going on in sports cards or don't understand the nuances of the industry, that are making decisions for the industry that not necessarily that they're unqualified for, because they're trying to make money for the company, but it might just not be the best decision for sports cards or the industry as a whole. As frustrated as I get with the hobby sometimes, there are things that companies do, and it is more, I don't know. Actually, I was gonna say it's more with companies, but now thinking of it, it's kind of a combination of a bunch of things. Like, I don't know. I saw something on Twitter that when Topps posted something about, like, there's a new Series One. I think that they're maybe replacing Topps Big League with like a new type of like big league style product with Series One. I mean, the comments were insane. The comment People were like angry in the comments. It's like, it may even, I don't know. That seemed like it was maybe misguided anger. If I'm going to be honest, and maybe it's even misguided anger from myself. Like, I just, when people were like, they were not happy with the product. I'm like, this is a product for kids. Like, what are we talking about? Like, who cares? But either way, so PSA, and I think this technology probably existed before, but now that it's getting integrated into PSA system, I think it's very cool. There was a big update with the app. The first thing, which I thought was kind of interesting, I mean, I thought it was funny that they, one of the big changes was that you can now go dark. You can have PSA app in dark mode. Um, for anybody who is a dark mode versus light mode user, you can now switch it if you'd like. But the other big change is that you can scan a card. Like, you take a picture of the card, and PSA's system or whatever they have will be able to pull up the card and tons of different information, tons of PSA card information, tons of sale information. And look, this is probably something that does exist with other apps. It was something I actually was thinking about the other day, because I got like a for the first time in a while, I actually bought some sports cards at a store. I know, pretty shocking. I bought some Donruss football, which, the other side of that conversation, there was WNBA Prism, and the the WNBA Prism Blaster was $35, and there was 24 cards in the box. I was like, I think I'm all good with that. I think I'll pass. But I bought some Donruss football. That you can get tons of cards. And that's one thing that I do. And I think that one was $30. So $30, I think, was worth what you get for opening up those packs. You got some cool cards. But I pulled like this one of the optic preview Bo Nix out of the Donruss pack, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I like looked it up, and I didn't know exactly which one was which, and that was kind of an issue. So I was thinking like, oh, it would be easy if somebody just made something where you could just scan it. Which, like I said, I'm sure if I had Googled it, I probably would have been able to find that pretty quickly. But now PSA has it within their app, which I think that is a big change or a big addition to PSA's everything that PSA has going on. I mean, PSA and Tops are PSA, I probably give a little bit more credit than Tops if I'm going to be honest with their innovations. Now, PSA, PSA, I think is one of the most interesting companies within the industry because they have been able to grow pretty exponentially, but also like keep the value of the PSA slab. It's a very weird dynamic that they have going on. Like they have created grading that is so easy to do. But they also have been able to hold like the PSA 10 or the PSA 9 ish is probably close. PSA 8, you're basically breaking even. Like you pretty much spent if you were to try and sell the PSA 8 of a modern card. Obviously, older cards are going to be different in price, but like of a modern card of a 2020, I don't know, 2023 and beyond. Um, you are probably breaking even with a PSA 8, PSA 9, you probably making a little bit of profit. PSA 10 obviously is what you're shooting for, but it is impressive that PSA has been able to grow. They've been able to grow and make their experience for customers better, but also still maintain the value of their slab. I think that actually is one of the more impressive things that's happened within sports cards over the past few years is PSA's growth and how they've been able to do it. Obviously working with Card Ladder and working with places like eBay and and again, working on corporate partnerships. I mean, Nat Turner, I think, has done a really phenomenal job. And I think Nat Turner, I want to give him the credit because I think he is a perfect example of somebody who knows sports cards and has been in the hobby and has the experience at an executive level to be like a CEO and is able to actually give people what they want. I think Michael Rubin is another example, but I think he has I don't know. Michael Rubin's a billionaire. I don't necessarily know if Nat Turner is a billionaire. I'm sure he's probably in the millions somewhere, maybe even tens of millions. But if Michael Rubin were to be running the sports card business, I'm sure that it would be much different. And I wouldn't be surprised if Nat Turner, because he is more of an investor, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the future we see him working at one of these sports card companies potentially, and hopefully if he does, that will then mean he'll be able to do some of the similar things that he's been able to do with PSA and grow the business but also make the business good for the industry. And I think that is something that definitely deserves a lot of credit. The other story, it's not sports card related, it's memorabilia related, and it is like the if you thought the story of the jersey swap Wembenyama, if the Wembenyama jersey swap story was weird from you, or if it seemed like a weird story to begin with, it just keeps getting weirder. Apparently, the jersey sold for $73,000 either this past weekend or the weekend before. But the seller, like a day before the auction was supposed to end, they wanted to pull the auction. They didn't want to sell the jersey anymore. And that ended up being one day after the news of the injury, which I think we based on the fact that we saw the Wembenyama sell for like 800K. I don't think the injury really affected many big auctions of his that were ending during that weekend. But the interesting thing about that story is that the seller is saying that like the child didn't want to sell the jersey eventually, which I don't know, if he's selling a jersey for 75 grand, I probably would be like, hey, sorry, yeah, I mean, unless like I don't know, it's very weird. Like I think it all depends on. There are details of that story that I think kind of change maybe my opinion on it, or it could change the details of the story. Like $73,000. Like if $73,000, if like these people are millionaires and they just have 73K, like I could see why maybe you would look at it and say, oh well, we'll just we don't really care. We'll try and pull the auction and see if we can keep the jersey. But the other weird, like I said, the thing is they were trying to the dad who was apparently the person that was kind of in contact with gold, obviously, because the kid in this story is only 5 years old, which again, saying that the kid didn't want to sell the jersey, if it's a 5 year old, it's like, come on. The 5 year old, the chance that they even like remember the jersey being sold is pretty far fetched. I mean, sure, they probably are going to remember the story about swapping the jersey with Wembenyama, but I don't know, or maybe I'm incorrect about that, but maybe it's a story that they will remember potentially. But they want to pull the jersey. One of the interesting things was that I guess in the consignment agreement, they didn't want any photos of the child used in the marketing, which apparently Golden did do. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And it's going to court. Apparently, there's a court order to get the jersey not to sell. So we'll see if that happens. I mean, if I were the buyer of that jersey, I would probably just say, hey, I'm not going to buy the jersey. Just keep it. Like, if you're buying a jersey for $74,000, there's probably other jerseys you can buy of his that are game worn that aren't going to give you as much of a headache. Like, granted, it seems like a strange story, and it's been a pretty strange story from the jump. Like the fact that it was a jersey swap and it goes up for auction like literally like a week after, and like Wembenyama is even tweeting about the jersey. Like it's all just such a strange story, and it seems like it's going to continue. I don't know if there are some sort of ulterior motives here. Like the story itself is just so like weird and like not and abnormal that it just doesn't things just don't add up in my opinion. It just seems like a very like weird circumstance that like the whole thing with when the jersey sold and then there was the injury and then the jersey gets pulled and Golden's using the images of the child and all of these things, and they would try and pull the jersey right before the sale's about to end. It's a very weird situation, and, I guess we'll see going forward if there are any updates. Like that will be kind of what I'll talk about some updates later on. But it was actually this is the first time covering the story on the podcast because for me, I was just like, it's just like annoying that they did the jersey swap and then they are selling the jersey. It's like, oh, come on, really? That's what we're doing. But then it sells for $74,000, and then they actually don't want to they want to keep the jersey. It's very odd. So if there are any updates, I probably will just cover it quickly on the podcast. But I don't know. I mean, it's weird and I guess it's unfortunate for everybody because it's something that now is a story that's probably going to. I don't know. I mean, it's probably going to stray some players away from doing jersey swaps now because, like, they're going to look at it and say, now, with kids, I guess, or families that play not doing players, like it's just an unfortunate circumstance that, like, now it's the same with like maybe players seeing how much their autographs are selling for. Like, they're not going to. Some players are just not going to autograph now because they see what they can really get if they're putting their autographs on the secondary market. I don't know. It's just another capitalism story that really is just everybody trying to make a dollar off of every single situation. So it is what it is. And that's pretty much all we've got for this week. So we're going to have the recap. Obviously, if you're listening to this on Friday or if you are listening to this on Saturday, you've already heard all of the recap. So thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you at the start of next week.